All right, we're going to talk about tin models. So, my name is Sherry and I'm the manager of tech support. We're going to talk about tin models. So that's what you're here for. I was in the wrong room thinking that I'm the wrong person to listen to. Did they start recording me? Yeah, they started recording me. All right, how many people use tin model already? How many people are familiar with tin model or are here just for a refresher? All right. So tin models are a way of creating a 3D surface. And it took a long time for me to really understand how tin model created surfaces. It projects everything down to a flat plane and then connects all the dots. That's why vertical surfaces in our tin model don't give you a great view of the vertical surface. So what is a tin model? TIN stands for triangulated irregular network. Connect three soundings to make a face, and then that's the surface, and it gets the depth in the middle of the surface, and that's how it colorizes it. Tin model program can make files from these 4 items. You can't do it with raw data, you can't do it with JSF data, you have to have one of those 4 files. XYZ data, log files, matrix files, or HS2 formatted files. We need to know what a Delaunay triangle is. This is all in your PowerPoints if you guys want to look through it. So, it's the way that you'll need to provide an LNW file if you don't want to do the Delaunay triangles. Tin models creates pretty pictures colorized based on the color depths that you provide. So you provided the XYZ data and you say this depth is this color, and then it creates a nice surface that looks like nice and pretty. Blues, reds, yellows, greens, pretty common colors. You see them in everything. Tin model can also do volumes. How many people do volumes in tin model? A few of you do volumes in tin model. Anyone have trouble with volumes in tin model? Okay. So I'm going to explain a couple things as we get started. I'm a little bit different as far as how I present the material to you guys. I ask questions a lot. I talk to you guys a lot about what you're doing. How many people, again, use tin model right now and could make a tin if I gave you a file? Quite a few of you. So if I sat up here and read the PowerPoints to you and said, oh, this is what a triangle looks like, I'm going to bore the crap out of you and we're going to waste our time. You're here to learn something and get something out of this. For the people that don't use tin model right now and you want to know what tin model means or how it works, stop me. I'm not going to get upset. Say, hey, I don't understand what that meant, or what are you talking about? Very surprising to me, someone within my own company recently asked me what a tin max side was. Everyone know what a tin max side is? Tin max side, we're going to talk about it. But I expected this individual to have already understood what that meant. We'll talk about it. If I skip over something or I go past something, stop. I spend a lot of time on dredges. They stop me for a lot of things. They don't let you finish a sentence sometimes before they ask the next question. Just picking on a couple dredgers that are in the room. That's all I'm doing. But I'm not opposed to stopping and talking about things. I'm going to try to get through a lot of it. If you have the little thumb drive that we provided you, everything that I'm going to talk about is on that thumb drive and more. I took all of the things that we talk about in tin model and put it in this thumb drive. This slide presentation that we talk about tin model is 113 slides. How many people want to look at 113 slides today? We're not going to do it. We talk about death by PowerPoint being a bad thing. We're not going to do death by PowerPoint. We're going to go into the tin model. I'm going to show you some examples. I am going to show you some slides. We're going to do both because it's a blended way of showing you the material that we're going to try to get through. So, with that being said, everyone comfortable with interrupting me? Everyone comfortable with my voice is a little scratchy today. I'm actually about 90%. I was 75 yesterday. I'm getting better. Just kind of run down. Tin model allows you to do volumes with a bunch of different ways. You can do tin versus level, tin versus LNW, or tin versus channel. The channel can be with or without zones. Or tin versus tin, and tin versus XYZ, which is basically tin versus tin. Everyone know what a tin versus tin is? If I created a surface, a tin is a surface of points, and it creates a surface. It's a way of representing your data not in dots. How many people know what a matrix is? You guys are all pretty familiar with matrix files? A matrix file is just a square that contains a depth. If you took the center of all those squares and connected them in triangles, you create a surface. Ever know what a mesh surface looks like? It looks like a whole bunch of lines drawn out, and it creates cool 3D options. Anyone ever seen Tron, the movie, a long time ago? They did 3D meshes in Tron. I'm old, so I've seen that movie. But that's what a 3D mesh looks like. A tin model does the same thing, except instead of it being a nice 3D mesh that it connects the centers and the triangles and all that stuff, which we just passed through, which I probably shouldn't have drawn any triangles. Right, Daniel? I can pick out Daniel because he's here today. Josh was in my last one. I picked on Josh. Input data, single beam data, multi-transducer, or multi-beam. It doesn't matter where your data came from. You can actually do a tin of LiDAR data even. It doesn't look very good because LiDAR data usually has trees in it. But contouring in tin model, you can export your DXF contours. You can contour at whatever levels you want, labels, lines, and solid fills. This is an example of a DXF solid filled contour with color. All that's available to us. In the earlier session in single beam, I talked about we're not a CAD program, right? HYPACK is not a CAD program. We do what we can to give you the tools that we can, but we interface with DXF files a lot. So a lot of the things we talk about is outputting to DXF, outputting to DGNs. We can read ArcGIS data, but we can't output to it. Tin model has an export function. Again, any of the people that were in the single beam session, I talked about sort and cross sort. There's an export in tin model. So in tin model, we can export our soundings on a gridded basis. And you'll get these nice, perfectly square, spaced out grids. You can't do that in any other program that's going to be based on distance. Cross sort does it based on a plotting sheet scale. Sort doesn't just, it won't give you an actual gridded distance. You might have 49 feet when you wanted 25 because of the way sort works. Tin model is going to take the center of the squares and it's going to give you a perfectly gridded sounding. Want to understand that? How many people work on dredge projects? A lot of times on some of the environmental jobs, they'll have a spacing that you have a 10 by 10 grid to clear a cell, right? Or a 5 by 5 grid to clear a cell. This gives you the 5 by 5 and you can get it spaced out. You can do the same thing in MBMax 64, where you can get a nice even grid. Bathymetric attributed grid surfaces. Anyone do bags? Okay, well, one person walking out the door raised his hand. You can get, when you do the output, the differences at the tin vertices, so you can get the actual differences between two. If you did a tin to tin, you can export the difference. If you're doing a survey over a dredge project and you want to see where the material came and went from, all right, sir. You can actually do tin to tin difference and export the differences. It's kind of a nice feature sometimes, but you wouldn't want to do volumes based on it, right? Any questions on the exports that we can do? Yes?
So we're doing a multi project, and I don't know if this is clear here, but the required deliverables of geo-TIF, is that something that can be exported out of here?
Yes. Yes, sir.
You want to do differences?
No, I said.
Lines over a difference. You mean like you want to calculate lines from 10 to 10?
No, I was saying the tin to tin, if you exported the differences and tried to do a volume with just the differences, you're going to get the same thing. It's just, I do tin to tin and export volumes. My mind's not working in a linear fashion right now, guys. So sometimes I'm going to say things that don't follow up till a little bit later. I apologize. GeoTIFF question. We're going to get to that when we look at the 3D color fill. You can export the GeoTIFF right from there. So that would be something you could look at. We'll talk about that. That's not in the export button. It's from one of the actual windows. Filled matrices. We talk about doing dredge projects a lot. At least I do, because that's my background in HYPACK. If you have single beam data on the left, you can bring it in, create a tin of it. Man, it's going to connect all the triangles, and you're going to export this from that data. because you connected all the triangles of the single beam data, it interpolated in between, and it created a matrix that you could then put on your dredge. How many people do single beam data with tin model? How many people do primarily multi-beam data with tin model? Okay. I ask a lot of questions, remember? When making a tin, a couple things you have to have. You have to have an input file and you have to have a tin max side. That's it. The only two things you have to have.
When you say that side, you mean the leg length?
That's leg length. That's what we're going to get into. We call it tin max side. And that's what confuses people. Tin max side is how far can I connect any 2 points. That's all it is. It's going to take the first point in the file, and it's going to say, I'm standing right here, and all of you guys are XYZ data points. How far away can I connect? If I got a 50-foot radius around me, I can connect to a bunch of you. If I got a 5-foot radius, I can't connect to anybody. So how far away can I look for points? So let's assume the 5-foot radius, and we're all XYZ data points in the room. If I got a 5-foot radius, who gets thrown out? Well, there's a couple guys in here that can connect. There's a couple little triangles. There'd be some spotty data. If we increase that to about a 10-foot radius, a lot of you are going to connect in the middle of the room, right? It's less from Ned to the guy next to him over here. I don't know your name, I apologize. Ned and Fred. Frank. Sorry, Frank. So from Ned to Frank, it's less than 10 feet. We can connect them. We might be able to connect over here, that triangle, but a lot of it, we're going to have gaps. So you have to increase your tin max side to get those points to connect. Does that illustrate the point? You guys see what I'm talking about? That's what tin max side stands for. Maximum connection distance between data points. I don't know if it's on one of the later slides. It should be. If it's not, we'll find out in a minute. Anyone know what that number should be in a single beam data set? There's a guideline. What is it? 150% of your line spacing. Do you know why? Remember anyone in here from the single beam class that joked about boat operators not being perfect? You can't run a zero offset line. AUV might, or ASV might, but your boat operator is going to wiggle a little bit. So you want to be 150% of your line spacing. That's never far enough to connect 3 lines, and it's far enough to connect any error in your boat operator. Because on line 1, he might have gone left a little. On line 2, he might have gone right a little. 150% of your line spacing, if you got a decent survey, should connect your data points. Multi-beam data. What do you think your tin max side is in multi-beam data? Your grid size. But if you're just bringing in, if you just bring in all your multi-beam data points and not gridded data points, I put it at like a foot. Because if you have more than a foot, it's never going to connect around a point or over land where you only have 1 foot to connect. Usually that'll work. Because with multi-beam data that's gridded, you can do 150% of your grid spacing, which I gridded it at 5 feet, so I'm going to do 7.5 foot for my tin max side, and it should connect everything. Does that make sense? It might go a little bigger than that, but if it's ungridded, I'll go 1 foot, and then I don't have to worry about it, because it can be time consuming to figure out what the best answer is. The second thing is, unless you're doing a huge data set, and you see when I said we got a 5-foot radius and we realized we didn't connect a lot of points, I can just go back here and set it again and it'll rebuild my grid, rebuild my tin. Huge data sets might take me an hour, but smaller data sets aren't going to take that long. So, I said you have to have a main input file and a tin max side. Those are the 2 things you have to have. You can have a secondary file if you want to do the tin-to-tin comparison, so you can have 2 files. You can have an LNW file if you want to compute volumes along an LNW, or there's a section where you can do the 2D sections through the data. If you add an LNW file, there's a button that'll say create my tin, and then I want to see a 2D cross-section at each one of those stations and view them. You can do it that way. If you didn't survey your data with lines and create that, you can check cross-sections without going to cross-sections and volumes. The other thing, by having an LNW file, it says export along a line. You did a multi-beam job, but you have to do cross-sections and volumes on a dredge project, let's say, and we're going to calculate volumes on a cross-sections and volumes. I did multi-beam. I bring my stationing in. that's my approved stationing for the project, and go to export and export my multibeam data along that line. It strips your multibeam data out as single beam data, and then you can bring it into cross sections and lines. Anyone ever do that? I've done it a bunch. You can actually export your multibeam data, bring it in cross sections and volumes. You can bring in a CHN file, an advanced channel design file, so you can do volumes against the channel design. Anybody ever do that one? Bring in an advanced channel surface. In the last class, I said bringing data into advanced channel design, you could do the 3D faces, and I told somebody I wasn't sure if you could do it with a DGN. One of the people that was in the class came up to me afterwards and said if you export the faces as XML files, which there's a way to do in CAD, that we wrote an import function for him that brings the XML file in as a perfect surface. Complicated channels can be brought into advanced channel design as an XML file. Yes.
So is that routine that you're just referring to something that's implementing or?
It was done in 2019.
Okay, so if I have the latest software, it's in
Yes.
Is there any benefit to using channel file over an XYZ?
Yes.
You can cover it.
A channel file, we're going to talk about channel files in a little while, and zones and sections. You can actually export zones in a channel file. So you could have right descending bank, left descending bank. You could have different parts of the turning basin. You could have all different things that'll be broken down in volumes we computed of that area. You can't do that with an XYZ. An XYZ is basically tin to tin surface, which a line tin with LMW file does the non-Delaunay triangles, which if you're doing single beam data and you don't check that box, you can get long, thin triangles at your edges that checking that box will help remove. Remove narrow triangles at the borders, so sometimes you'll get that triangle that, you know, we're standing here and the three of us create a triangle and the three of us create a triangle, but over here I've got this one little line that creates a really thin, narrow triangle to the tin. You can remove those little ones that don't account for anything. And under these two, you can multi-select files. Does everyone know what I mean by multi-select? Click the button and say open, and then you get a list of files. If you clicked one of them and hold shift and click the bottom one and it selects all 10 files, that's multi-selecting. So if you have 6 or 7 XYZs you want to merge in, you can bring all 6 XYZs in at one time. You don't have to merge them outside the program. It'll do it when it loads them in. Tin max side, I just said this, 150%. So at 25, I got a nice little, probably an end of a pier or something. At 100, it covered it. Large enough not to cover that, but 150% of point spacing. Everyone good with that? They understand what I'm saying there? Okay. So this is what I was just talking about with that aligned tin to L&W. You get this scalloping effect right there. And then the narrow triangles that I illustrated over here was talking about, I should have realized this one was up there at the top without the removal. See all those narrow triangles that go from that point down? We want to get rid of that garbage, it's not real. This stuff up in here. Okay. You can do some pretty cool things with tin model. You can generate some really cool images. A lot of times I see people make 3D tins and then they'll take the tin model and put it in a report somewhere. They'll export it, or they'll export the geotiffs. This Bonneville Dam has been around as long as I've been with HYPACK. We've had that data set that we play with every year because it's a nice set of data. Yes, sir.
Previous slide, any question on align tin and single beam?
Yes.
Could you just describe that? That check.
So it projects your tin connection points to the L&W point. So in here you can see the planned line. Here's where the plan line is.
Right.
So instead of connecting, like we have a lot of, actually the plan lines I believe are right there. It moves your sounding points to your plan line. It's almost like the snap to line feature within the signal emitter, and it eliminates some of the, because of the way the triangles are made, it eliminates, it was deleting in that Delaunay triangle in the beginning that I kind of passed over quick. It draws a circle and then it connects the points there. It eliminates the errors caused by that method. So let's go back to the beginning and answer that question. I went over it because Delaunay triangles. The draw a circle contains all 3 points of any triangle. No other point will be contained in the circle, right? Single beam lines not perpendicular to side slopes. That's why you would align it. You need to provide the line file, but it has to do with where is it? The methodology that the software uses to create the triangles. In the single beam, you have a lot of data points that are really close together, and it has a hard time connecting the points because you're trying to draw a circle around it, and you've got two lines parallel to each other that have a dense data set with a tin max side that's long enough to connect to the two, but it causes a problem with the adjoining triangles. So what it does is it eliminates that circle elimination check that it does when it makes the triangles. So, right. It uses the plan lines as the boundary for the, it tries to align more with the plan lines. I don't know that I'm explaining it exactly correct, so afterwards, if you want, we'll sit down and we'll get one of the programmers to explain it, because they're... Did that confuse anybody when we went back to the Delaunay stuff and what I was trying to explain to them? No, absolutely interrupt me, because I breezed over that because it's a big explanation about circles and how circles are eliminating joints and triangles, and I didn't want to get into it. I didn't want to confuse myself either. You ever get off topic and then you're like, oh, hey, let's have some Diet Coke. LiDAR data. There's a tin of some LiDAR data. One of the things that tin doesn't do very well is trees. Anyone ever look at a tin model of a tree? LiDAR data is it's above ground, it's topographic, and if you try to tin model a tree, it looks like garbage. Buildings look pretty cool, trees don't. So this is a beach segment with LiDAR data. Hydro and topo on this particular tin model. I believe the gray areas are all topo, and you can see over in here is the breakwater. So here we have a sample of a tin model with the draped charts. So you can see where the chart exists. If the tin exists, it cuts out the chart and it draws in the 3D model of it. It creates a nice image for a report. It's done in the 3D color model window where you can actually set those. Editing a model. So when you edit tin model, I'm not going to play the video of it, but here we had tin max side that was too big and it connected a lot of points we didn't want. You can go in and pick triangles specifically that you want to delete, or you can use a line, draw a line, you can bring a border file in. There's several ways you can eliminate triangles within the tin. Anyone ever edit the tin model? You guys want me to show you how to edit a tin model? All right. Just a second.
There are several tools in the Modify Edit Tin that allow you to adjust the final result of your tin model. I can select individual triangles with this tool and then erase them, but it's much more efficient to use the polygon pen. A multi-segment polyline. When I release the tool, it will find all the triangles that it crosses, and then I can erase them all at once. So if you're a little bit clever, you can do things like this. release the tool and hit the eraser. That's the polygon pen tool. Well, there are also a lot of little subtle tools in here that can affect your tin model. Right? For example, inside of here, I can break a triangle into more pieces by clicking on this one, and you'll see it will go ahead and insert at that location. You can also change, right, how a triangle leg is split. Let me grab that one there. And create a triangle. I can go ahead and reconnect two triangles. So if I select two triangles, well, let me see if I get two that make sense here, here, and here, right? Then I can go ahead and reconnect them. You'll see how it changed, put the diagonal across here if you were paying attention. You can also do break lines. And it's also possible to trim the tin model. If I can zoom the extents here for a second. I'm going to bring in a border file. Let's say I can then use the scissors to cut the tin model right along that border. And then I can do volumes just inside that border polygon.
Anyone recognize a voice?
What's the benefit of breaking up a triangle?
Sometimes you'll have a triangle that creates a face and it's along the dot here, and it'll create the triangle based on the distances, and you'll end up with a surface that, you know, it's more vertical than it is, and it'll connect these 2 points, and you'll end up with, you'll lose some of the volume you're looking for, because you have to really be in tune with the data you're looking at to know how that triangle should have been connected. A lot of times I don't edit the tins in those ways. We put the tools in because there are times that people will go through their data and know in this area, especially areas of large change, you may want to go and edit your tins that way.
Is there a border file for that? That's just the XYZ border file for HYPACK.
It's a regular border file from HYPACK. Border files are very powerful in HYPACK. People don't realize how much they can actually do. Having a border file, you can trim anything. Yes, sir.
So along those lines, I mean, for instance, the example that you just used, it makes sense to trim down that data set with a border file. Often I want to preserve. Sometimes using the max leg length works against me. So, like,
You want to connect things and go edit them later.
yeah, it sounds like that's what I want to do. Whereas, you know, if I, when I'm editing, I tend to try to minimize the max leg length as much as possible while still preserve the area that I'm trying to outline, right? But sometimes, let's say I've got a long shape, long area that I've surveyed, and if I don't have, the tin's not preserved along that the longest edge of the area. So I need like an extra triangle in there.
You need to connect them.
Right.
Okay. Let's see if we can create something that. So,
And
yes, sir.
also, it seems like the only check I have to see if you don't immediately know what, in order to check if your area has been preserved, say you're playing with that max life line, or trying to make sure you're not long enough. What's the quickest check to?
So when I create them, the first thing I do is I go into 2D contours. That's the fastest drawing routine that we have for the tin model as far as drawing it. It shows me the 2D contours. And if I look at 2D contours and I've got a gap, you'll see that there's no data in there. There'll be no contour in that area. And then I'll go back and adjust my tin max side. One thing that we talked about with tin max side is you have to have a number, right? You have to have a digit in there, but you don't. In 2018, I believe it came out, maybe 2017, as far back as that. If you leave it 0, my tin max side is not entered, right? There's nothing there. I didn't put a number in. Contours, 2D contour. I said you can do this, and then it didn't do it, right? It did it. Filter. there's my 2D filled area. This is a perfectly flat demonstration, so it's not much to see. So it's going to, if you leave it empty, it's going to try to approximate the best max side you can use. So if you don't put a number in, about 2 years ago we modified it so it generates a border file around the edges that you don't see, and then it tries to calculate what the best max side is inside that border, and then it's going to use it. Unfortunately, and I'm asked our programmer, we want to find out what number it used, right? You want to know in the future, so we want some feedback on that, which right now we don't have. But we're going to get that.
So ideally, in my workflow, I typically want to use a border file and not even bother with.
The tin max side.
Yeah, right. I want to generate a tin inside this shape.
So you might want to try to use it without any number in there and just let it generate it on its own. Or if you're using a border file, and that's what his question is there's some areas that he needs narrow triangles that don't get generated because he can't use the huge tin max side, can't use a little tin max side because he doesn't know which one to use, but he wants those long triangles. I would start off with a 10,000 tin max side. It's going to connect everything it can possibly connect, and then clip it with a border file. That's going to give you the most triangles as an option. Everyone understand why we would do that in this case?
Question about the border files. So is there any way to create them directly from a CAD entity within DXF? Or, I mean, what I've done in my workaround is I'll draw them in CAD and I'll create a CAD XYZ points and those and then import those in.
That's the only way I know it. That's the only way, because the border file has a special format in it, which isn't much of a format. It's just XYZ points,
Right.
and then the last point duplicates the first point, and the last point's inside or out, right? So everyone understand about border files? Do we want to talk about border files for a second? A border file we generate just to the polygon, and then the final point is whether you care about what's inside the border file or what's outside the border file. The border file can be used to exclude data from a set of data, either cut a hole in the middle, a lake, a void in your data, or to eliminate spurious data around the edges. If you click outside, you care about what's outside. So what's ever in the inside is getting deleted. That makes sense? If you last click, right click inside in the new border file, you just check a box inside or outside. But if you care about what's inside, you want that point to be inside. Make sense? Yes, sir.
I got a second because point, which is, I mean, I would assume it's a common problem that a lot of people come up with from a workflow perspective is, I tend to use HYPACK with ArcGIS a lot. A lot of other people use HYPACK with AutoCAD or some other program where they're dealing with their design data.
Okay.
It would be great to have tools to easily bring in either AutoCAD data and quickly turn that into a border, or ArcGIS data and quickly turn that into a border. Some sort of easy, quick conversion tool.
Okay.
I come across that all the time. I get it, border file is like its own.
And one of the things,
It's not the same as a shape. It's not the same as a polygon.
but it has the same reference information in it.
Right.
What
Yeah,
we
right.
need to do is say this data means this to us.
Mhm. But if I say bring in AutoCAD data, then it throws in circles around every single node or point. It's a little clunky. From a feature point of view, it'd be great if that was streamlined. We can come up with every project, everything I do.
So one of the things we do at the conference every year, and we're going to digress for a minute away from tin models, we ask you guys what's wrong. In the same in class, I talked about this. We need to know what doesn't work for you, in specific like this particular workflow thing. We're trying to make the software work better. We've got a whole roadmap of things that we're trying to do better for tools like this, where we come up against people who are outputting data into ArcGIS, or bringing ArcGIS shapes in, or bringing AutoCAD shapes in. It would be nice to say this DXF file is a border file, and then apply just a DXF as a border file. You understand, Daniel? You feeling it? Daniel's one of our programmers.
I don't do 10
I know you don't, but this is how it is with all the programs.
I actually have a workaround for that. I found online there's a program called XYZ. And it's a very old and archaic program, but it's very simple. You kick out a DXF that's 2013 or older, and you just hit a convert button, it turns it to an XYZ, and then all you need to do is change the dot extension file to BRD, and then bring in border editor.
Just change the attention.
That's it. And then bring in border editor, make sure your head is correct.
Right, right. So are you still using it now?
No, now it's a checkbox. It's still there, you just don't see it.
So the default is something.
Yeah, in the border files, when you go into a, now it's an outside checkbox right here. Used to be whether you right-clicked inside or outside.
I can't tell you how many times I've had to just custom make border files.
Yeah, I do that every day as well.
Yeah.
So I'll put on, you text inside of that and it'll generate, gives you the values of those, or it creates civil 3D entities, or there's a million different ways to do it, but it's still an extra step.
It would be nice to be able to click on even the DXF and the HYPACK, more like a CAD program. Maybe that's asking too much, but
Snap to those.
yeah, snap to notes.
Okay. I created a border file. That's what's in a border file. A series of XYZ points. So when you're exporting your text from AutoCAD or whatever and change your extension to BRD, it's going to create a polygon.
Yeah, and that's what I
So I will talk to them when we get back and see if we can come up with a way to bring in CAD files. That's something that we want you guys to bring to our attention when things don't work right, or how they can make it easier for you, right? I'm not just saying it, I'm the manager of tech support. I'm used to people calling me up and saying, they never called to say, hey, surveying today is beautiful out. Hope it's nice in the office.
I'll be sure they.
You know, I say this all the time. Nobody ever calls and says surveying's going great. I actually got a call one day after a conference where we got called and said, hey, just thought we'd be the first one to tell you it's working today.
Should we all call Karen?
Yeah, call Karen and say, hey, today's going great. She'll go nuts. She's alone in the office right now doing tech support.
Make sure it's not when you first start, late in the afternoon.
Yeah, at the end of your survey
At the
day.
end of the day.
I said this earlier in the singlement class. We're kind of off topic and we got to get going, but I said this earlier in the singlement. How many people have ever gone surveying and everything worked? If that one day happens, you need to quit. It's kind of like hitting a home run in the World Series. You should retire that day. Not playing the next game. All right, tin model. We're talking about editing tin models. Tin models and vertical walls. Vertical structures, you have to rotate the surface, and there's a way to rotate the surface and then calculate it to get a tin of a vertical surface. We have a 3D mesh program that connects the lines in a vertical surface better than tin model can. So you have this nice vertical surface in here. If you have vertical structures, you want to rotate the surface and it'll I'm going to click the video, which I hate doing, but
This is a 3D tin where we have a vertical structure here. You can see what a lousy job it did when you just generate the tin model, because everything gets projected to a 2D plane and then it makes the triangles. It connects points up here with points down here, and it really comes up looking quite bad. You can fix this by going Modify, Edit 3D Tin. And what we want to do now is take our tin surface, I'm going to rotate it and angle it backwards. So in this case, I'm going to edit it until it's back 45 degrees. Now when I drop it down, these points along the wall, when they go down to the 2D plane, will have separation. And it will give me a better result when I go ahead. So I'll click this little icon here, which will regenerate the model. You see it in grayscale here, so we'll be perfect in this one orientation. If I close this and go back to the 3D tin now you can see how that vertical wall has very nice detail to it that we didn't have before. So with vertical structures, you want to reorient your data so when you project it onto that 2D surface,
I don't like going to videos during this stuff, and I don't like death by PowerPoint, but I don't have this data set, and it's a really nice video. It's on your thumb drive that talks about how to do vertical surfaces. How many people survey their vertical surfaces? Happens a lot, right? Go to your dock walls or stuff. It does a great job of it, and for production or for presentation purposes or contours, it does a much better job of it all. All right. Tin models. I got off track. We got to get back on track here. Talked about editing tin models. Anyone have questions about editing tin models so far? We're good with that? How we modify them, how we go in, how we can do the 3D rotation of them. You can bring background charts in. You can actually change which background charts are displayed so you can see your tin model against the background chart. That's only visible in the tin when you go to edit, right? So you can bring those charts back up and you can actually edit those around the chart. So in here, I've got a wall, but I've got tin data over there. Maybe that's real, maybe it's not. But if I had triangles like this triangle over here, I probably want to eliminate that triangle because my chart says, or my DXF file says, there shouldn't be data there. I'm tinning across something. It's a way to give you a visual reference to what you want to clean out of your tin model. You can't use a DXF file and say just slice everything that's not in this surface, but you can actually use it as a visual reference. Any of the things that we bring in as a background chart, including target files, can be brought in to show where you want to edit your data. Yeah, you should be able to bring in, because we can bring in any other displays. So any S57 charts, TIFF files, Mr. SID files, all that stuff should be able to be drawn. Clipping a tin with a border file, we talked about that enough. Exporting to GeoTIFF is what you were asking about earlier. When you go into the 3D, color 3D model, is my favorite one to use. So let's go out here. So I'm going to make a tin. I'm going to bring in some XYZ data. Generate a 10 of it, maybe. Let's see where that XYZ data is. I'm going to generate an XYZ file real quick. So now I'm gonna go, I was in MBMax 64, so it's multi-beam data. I'm gonna do that 1 foot thing I was talking about with multi-beam data. See if it connects enough of my data points. Should have left it 0. It's taking a long time to do 10 max side adjustment. I don't want to wait. So much faster than that. So I left it 0. This is the section of the river. This is part of the turning basin. All of those triangles I want to get rid of because that's land. So I'll come in and grab it. Hey, clear the polygon, he said. That's pretty. Okay, that should happen. I can start this one. So, I just failed at trimming a tin in front of you. Rob will have to edit that out later. Sorry. It was just as easy to go back and change my tin max side to something reasonable, and it worked. This is what I was trying to get at, when you can rotate it around and look at it in different angles. We can change our light source, illustrate different parts of it. Zoom the extents of it. This button over here, what I wanted to show you guys was to export to GeoTIFF. Anyone ever export to GeoTIFF out of here?
I didn't know it was possible. I have to bring it into CAD and do it that way.
So when you come in here, if you go in and you tell this the view parameters and you set it for a tilt of 0 and a spin of 0, so it's flat like that, this globe lights up. Right there on that button. This is all geo-referenced data. If you make it a flat projection, you can export to GeoTIFF.
But is it a GeoTIFF that's gonna display what you see there as a reference?
It's going to be geo-referenced what you...
Values attached so that, let's say, ArcView could run analysis on it and color it.
It's going to be... It's going to be a real-world scale. So if you're in feet to, you know, it's every unit is 1 foot. So if you're in a, I don't understand the question.
Well, like, see, it, but when you export to GeoTIFF now, is it when you have this detailed resolution there as it would be if you zoomed in? If you zoom all the way in, you're only looking at like, will it take the whole data set every time you hit that button?
Whatever's on the screen, 1 foot per pixel, and it's going to be 92 megabytes.
You can adjust the resolution output from that.
Okay, so I can go in here, I can zoom in on it. One foot per pixel. Come in here and add a TIFF. So I'm going to show you what's on the screen, and it's going to show you at whatever resolution you created it at. And that should, you should be able to import that right into CAD.
But it'll maintain the colors that you were, that's just, so the deliverable for this particular project that I'm talking about, they're wanting a GeoTIFF that contains C values so that they can bring it into ArcView and they'll change the colors themselves and ArcView perform analysis. So my workaround's been I build a 10 in AutoCAD and then I export it out of there and it does it, but I've not been able to.
Okay, so you need to have numbers too.
Yes, so that they can color the, they could run their own separate.
Why would they want that as a GeoTIFF instead of an
That's
XYZ file?
CPRD is requiring that in the job. Everybody that's doing multi-beam survey.
A GeoTIFF of XYZ points would be,
GeoTIFF is an image file.
yeah.
It's a picture.
Not in this case.
We'll see. I think they're talking more about like a ArcGIS graph.
But it's a GeoTIFF.
Yeah, Arc's got.
Maybe they have a way of embedding.
So you can
Yes.
build a surface and you export a DEM as a GeoTIFF. And it's geo-referenced with Z values.
Right.
And then they can bring it in and run analysis or color however they will use it.
So their color value, actually, Daniel, what they're probably doing is instead of an RGB value at the pixel, is they're outputting a depth at the pixel. So they're probably using the color value to store the elevation.
That's interesting. That's something we could look into, but presently I don't think any GeoTIFF file.
That'd probably be the only way you could do that as a GeoTIFF. Which I would just export them as an XYZ file and they could import it, but that's not what they want, so.
No, that's not what I want.
All right,
No, but they export points and then Arc create image. And,
Right, okay. Because it's such a huge data set, it's like, that's a, you get to do that.
yeah, that's not something that, now that I understand more of the problem and for the rest of the group, you understand what he's trying to get at. He's trying to generate what we just generated. It's nice to generate those GeoTIFF files. You can do a lot of things with them. You can actually export them to Google Earth from within HYPACK and send them to your customer that doesn't have HYPACK, and they can bring it up in Google Earth, and it looks really cool. It's a nice way for, you know, pretty pictures sell money, right? They generate income. People want jobs if they see pretty pictures. If they you send them a pretty picture of your survey, like that, with a nice color-filled, sun-illuminated matrix, or geotiff, it looks really nice. We're going to get back to tin model. Okay, for the people that aren't used to tin model, or people that are and have never used Z-exaggeration, if you have a relatively flat bottom, you can use Z-exaggeration to highlight hills and valleys in your bottom, or exaggerate things when you, especially when you want to do the sun illumination. So in our tin model we just had up there, we can come in here, we can do sun illumination and change the way that the image looks. It's kind of a dramatic change to it. On my screen it's a little hard to see up there, but you can change, you guys can see what it's doing to the different display if you want to highlight something. The second part you can do is you can come in here under the screwdriver, or the wrench in the gear here. Let's go, instead of 1 exaggeration, we're going to times the Z by 5. It's going to take 1 and make it 5. It's going to take 2 and make it 10. And then when you use sun illumination like I did, see how much more dramatic the contours show up? You don't want to do that and output data sets that are multiplied, but for display purposes and for contouring or display purposes, you can actually see out here a lot of the ridges became a lot more pronounced and easier to define, easier to see. Now if we export that geotiff again and put it into a report, put it into AutoCAD or Google Earth so the customer can look at it, it's very dramatic where those ridges are, where those things exist. Start looking at the whole data set. And what's probably 2 little objects on the bottom that don't amount to anything jump out at you because you can see them, because the exaggeration creates a bigger shadow. Any questions about that? Being that this is a tin model, I can rotate it, right? It's a 3D display.
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
Can I show plan lines overlaid on that?
Yes, if I had loaded plan lines, and I come in here, I have the ability to turn on my plan lines,
Okay.
which in this particular project I didn't have them, but you can overlay plan lines, you can come in and do a grid.
I was gonna pick your brain about cross sections, but if I can overlay plan lines, that's better than cross sections.
For what you need to do in here. The other thing is I talked about, I moved it. I'm not using my mouse. There you go. Stop moving your fingers. If you load the plan lines when you're doing one of these, under sections, you can go to 2D sections and then step through the sections and take screen grabs also that way.
I hate the cross sections in tin model. Hate. That can we switch from single beam to multi beam, so from average end area to tin, and to produce the deliverables that our customers are used to, trying to use tin to create cross sections, and it's so ugly. I usually export a log file, open it in cross sections and volumes just to produce some pretty cross sections for the customer. But I guess I can trash all that maybe and try to sell them a 3D tin, with cross sections overlaid on, plan lines overlaid on top. It shows way more than a cross section anyway. But yeah, cross sections.
So the section I just was talking about and was promoting, we got a couple thumbs down, which that's what we want to hear, right? What doesn't work. It was put in there so people could step through their sections. Say again?
I use it a lot, pre-post, and like where the template is.
Just to look at them that way.
Just to step through to see what my cut is, and what I cut. It's really great to give the operator just be able to step through as opposed to just looking top-down view of where his cut is left. Aside from it, say, oh, just this part, why it's really hard there. It has some sort of preference.
It is nice to see a profile view of where the shoals are remaining.
Yeah, you want to be
And
able to
that's
see
what our
that.
operators are used to also, but it doesn't Yeah, I guess it got spoiled with CSV.
Well, cross sections and volumes, I mean, they do a really good job in there of drawing your cross sections and your profiles and a scale. In tin model, it's a slice through the data set that's not really scaled as well as it can be. So that's something we can take back and talk to our programmer about and see if we can improve that a little bit. Maybe make it a little better. You're already using it, maybe we can improve what you get out of it too. All right, so we've talked a lot about tin model. Vertical exaggerations, how to change that. Anyone ever use vertical exaggeration? Okay. There's a couple of you guys out there doing that stuff. In here, when we start looking at this, you can do a lot of things to make a tin model look pretty good. Anyone ever see the skirt feature? Right now I've got it going the wrong direction. Makes it look like a solid surface when you do your images. Sometimes it makes it just give it a little thicker look to it instead of being just a surface. You put the skirt down below the surface and you end up with this little gray bar. On mine it looks like a little gray bar here. It creates a flat surface at 50 feet and draws down to it and then draws a skirt around the edges. In some images, I mean, it looks more like a solid object instead of just a flat surface. You put a legend on, put a channel on if I had a channel. Contours, if you apply contours, it's going to apply to contours and you'll start to see gray, whatever the contour interval is. So you'll start to, every so many feet down here, you'll see a darkened line through the different contour layers so that you can actually differentiate that in the images. It helps a lot when you're drawing these things for customers especially, and you want to show something, you can put a 10-foot contour in there, a 20-foot contour in there, see a dark lines in their 3D images. Any questions about that stuff? All right. We talked a lot about what we can display. Let's get back to tin and TIFF combinations. You can embed a GeoTIFF in a 3D tin file for a nice effect. So some of the stuff we just talked about, exporting them. Tin model export, that's what I wanted to get into, DXF contours. So how many people export contours from HYPACK versus using it in AutoCAD? How many do HYPACK contours? Okay, you find it clunky or does it work? It's pretty straightforward and simple. One of the things we did this last year, and we're going to work towards over the course of the next year, we built contouring into MagEdit. How many people use magnetometers? So if you're editing magnetometer data in HYPACK, assuming you do that, you used to have to save it out as an XYZ file, bring it into tin model and export your mag contours. You don't have to do that anymore. In MagEdit, there's a button that says contours. So you're done editing your magnetometer data, you click a button and it brings up the dialog to create your tin contours. It tins your data and creates contours for you right in MagEdit. We're going to try to push that into some of the other programs. So you can do a lot of the DXF contours now, hopefully from other programs, because contours are pretty common. People use them. We want to make it simple to get to that step. With the DXF contours, you can fill the contour, you can have straight just lines, you can change the weight of the lines, you can change the intensity, make every 10th line stronger. There's a lot of things you can do with contours to make them stand out. How many people have a project that has a set depth? Should have been everybody's hand, right? Everybody has a set depth when you're surveying on a project, unless you're just out there surveying a lake to see what it looks like because you want to go fishing. That's what I do. We take our equipment to test it. Oh wait, that's because of the lake I fish in. I want to know how deep it is. No, I haven't done that, boss. Contour options. So in here, by default, it's a 2D contour. 2D contour means your contour lines don't actually have elevation applied, where AutoCAD would create a 3D surface out of them. They're just a flat surface with a number on them. Everything's on one layer, or multiple layers labeled by the contour. 2D contour for AutoCAD, 3D contour for AutoCAD 2D. Minimum leg, it's the minimum distance between two contour vertices. Anyone know what that means? Any? Create straight lines, right? So it doesn't make jagged, it's trying to smooth out your contours. You can export contours, you can export solid fill area, and then for 3D contours, lower or upper level. Your step. A lot of times when we export contours, there's a way you do your steps. So, when we go in here, export, EXF. You can't read it, but what it says is 12510 color scheme custom file last setting. And I can go up to 0.1 and 0.5. So if you're in feet or meters, 1 is 1 foot or 1 meter. So every foot it's going to generate a contour. If you're doing, LiDAR data, you could have a lot of contours if you did it in 1 foot and you got trees in there. If you go to the custom setting, you get to specify the contours that you're doing. It doesn't mean if you put 7.5 that it's going to go every 7.5 foot contour. It's going to be at 7.5. 7.5 is going to be your contour level. It doesn't assume that you want one every 7.5 feet. Does that make sense so far? If you want multiple contours, you would put in 7.5 space 15 space 22.5. That makes sense? That's how you're going to get those contours. You can specify the contours. I want one at 3, and one at 9, and one at 12, and one at 18, just because, and my numbers don't make sense there, 18. By putting a space in there, it's going to generate contours at those levels, which is very nice. It's a very nice way to do it. But if you have data and you don't want to sit there and type a bunch of different things, you can actually make your color file match what your contours are going to be. One of your options is your color file. So if you do your spacing in your color file, the way you want your contours, it's really easy to come in here and drop this down and say, do it based on my color scheme. Everyone understand that? I like the color scheme. So if I go under contour attributes, this is where I think a lot of the power of our tin model contours come from. That's hard to see. Still not easy to see. Is that a little better? All right. So in here, my first one says 5, 6, 7, right? Because I did every foot in my color scheme. So I can click on 5, hit Control, click on 10, and I can enable the label. So I selected the first one, 5 foot and 10 foot, and enabled the label. It's only going to put labels on the ones I tell it to put labels on. I can select them all by dragging my mouse down and say give me labels on all of them. Colors are going to be the black line color, but if I do HYPACK colors for those lines, see how they're all red now? It's going to do the color file contour. So if I do color fills, you're not going to get any lines. You're just going to get the color fills. But if I'm not doing color fills, my contours will be colored by depth. Makes a nice display A lot of people don't like that in their contours. So if I come back and I say, no, I don't want to do that. I want all my contours to be one color. Label properties, this is in survey units, so it's feet. If I have these labels going out in my contours, every 5 feet high is the label according to scale. So as you zoom in and zoom out, your contour label is going to get bigger or smaller. Label spacing is how far down the line it's going to print that label all the time. 100 foot seems pretty often to me. Usually it's a little further. How many decimal places we're going to put in there on the label, you can adjust that. So at 15 feet is my project depth. I want it to be a dashed line. I can click on it and change my line style for any contour. I can change the weight of that line. So we want to make, if you do a dashed line, leave it weight of 0. If you don't, it's going to make it a solid line once you start making it thicker because it makes a bigger line. So on line 14 is my cautionary depth. I'm going to make it a big fat line. Say OK to it. That's where you make all the changes to how you want your labels to look, right? So instead of doing that, we're going to do every 5 feet. And we're going to make 20 feet a dashed line and 30 feet a fat line. We'll label them all. 500 feet down, 10 foot high. When I hit export, nothing happened because I forgot to give it a name. There you go. Export. It's going to run through here and it's going to show me all the contours it's generating. You can see down here it's telling us what step it's at. Now it's going to go back to all my labels. Now it's done. You can also preview the file. It shows us what our file is going to look like. Go back to our shell. You guys see there, here's my 15-foot contour, my dashed line at my 20-foot contour, my thick line at my 30-foot contour.
You have the same ability to trim the contours to a border like you did in the triangles?
What you can do is, you can't trim the contours, you can trim the tin first. We have, I haven't tried this before, but
For your example you gave earlier with the dock running between your data and your triangle, that's a long enough length to go across the length of your dock. That's the problem that I run into, instead of having to go trim each one of those individual contour lines. The deal if there was a way to trim it to a border.
we'll see. This is the, we have a program called Contour Editor. And you could add a break line when you're doing the trim to tin, but not to the contours. Once the contours are generated, they're generated based on what you've allowed it to create the tin. So you would have to edit the tin before you generated the contours, not to create that contour.
Then it would stop the contour and the break line where the tin is broken.
Yes, it should. that you're trying to go in after the contours to edit the contour out?
Yeah, because if you establish that you want them to cover that much area, whatever you set as your parameters inside the contour, then it can default back regardless of what you have established earlier. You did draw contour lines across there. You're asking to define such small areas, length of lines.
Okay, you have a dock you trimmed out, and then you contours across it because your areas and smoothing, right? So when you go into export the XF minimum legs, there's no way to eliminate afterwards. Let's sit down and talk at some point, or give me some information about it, because I think I know what you're asking, and I have to see it to figure it out. What's happening is he's created the tin and he's got the gap in it, but the tin is creating the contour across the gap he's already created because the contour leg was long enough to create the leg. So that could be something we are not checking. I'll have to figure that out. It should avoid any gaps in data. It shouldn't contour across a tin void. If it's doing that, we've got a problem. It does. So it contours across a tin void. So we need to resolve that problem. That's where break line would normally keep it out, but you apply break lines in editing, you don't apply break lines in contouring. So if it's tinning okay. I'll get that straightened out, and if you give me your contact information, as soon as I get it straightened out, we'll let you know. Okay. I'll have to set a simulation up for that. All right, let's go back over here. Color attributes, you guys know how to do colors. We've got about 10 minutes left before lunch. And I don't like to go over for lunch. But we've gone through a lot of stuff and we've gotten into a lot of side conversations about things. Talking about tin models and how we do tin models. Have you guys gained anything about tin models so far today? Is there something that we want to talk about in the last 10 minutes real quick to solve any of your problems with tin model? And I apologize for the side stuff, but it happens. Anyone have a question for me or something I can talk about? Because I don't want to bore you to death. Yes, sir.
I've had some issues with the geo-tip within, opening the 2D fill area or the color model, 3D color model, and clicking the little geo-tip button where I had instances where the geo-tip is actually distorted and not actually geo-referenced.
Really?
Has anyone else had that issue?
Well, if it's happening to you,
Yeah, it's happening.
send us the geo-tip.
Okay.
Send it. Anyone know what help is? Help at HYPACK.com. All right. We try to do our best. You don't have to laugh at it.
I'm just laughing because I call all so much.
That's okay. Help at HYPACK.com. You met a bunch of people from tech support, right? I picked a lot on Josh, Christian, Joe, me, Karen, Josh, Jose, Christian Bermudez, if anyone's met him. He lives in Colombia. And Yvonne, who wasn't fortunately able to make it here, is unfortunately had to turn around and go home. If you send an email to help@hypack.com, it goes into a system called Kayako. Kayako's a ticketing system that we use to track your questions. Everyone on that team has access to those questions. We're there to help you. The second thing is you can call the number and ask for help, and we're there to help you. There's a lot of you, there's a few of us. We do our best to get back to you as fast as we can. If you don't get an answer, please let us know. Hey, I'm still waiting on an answer for that. Questions like that, if it comes up, send us a file and say, hey, I was working this, the geotiff. If it's too big, we'll send you a link back and you can send us the file another way. We want to improve your problems. We want to make sure it works better. I say that a lot. People don't believe me a lot, but we are actually trying to make this a better software on a daily basis. Daniel left because he got tired of getting picked on. I pick on the programmers a lot. They're really a great group of kids because I've got kids their age, just about. Okay, you have all these PowerPoints that we're talking about and the things that we're presenting to you. I tried not to spend all our time in PowerPoint today. We talked about it. If there's anything anyone has a question on, we can continue this or we can just move on to lunch. What do you guys got? All right, let's continue this because I like to talk. Just kidding. Matt, we were just talking about this minimum maximum leg thing. Minimum leg up here. So you can see how the blue line, no restrictions on the number of vertices. You put in 10 and it makes it a smoother line. You put in 25 and it makes it an even smoother line. So your minimum leg is actually going to generate a much smoother contour. That doesn't mean that you're less or more accurate where the contour belongs. It's just a different way of smoothing those contours out to generate a more realistic display. How many people have ever generated a contour that had those jagged spikes and lines and stuff in it? That's what this is supposed to solve. Because on the bottom, if the depth over here is 10 and the depth over there is 10 and there's a big jagged spike in the middle of it, it's really not changing that much in that short period of distance. Export along planned lines. I mean, we talked about that. You bring in planned lines, you go to export all format, and it generates your all lines.
I have a question, I guess.
Yes, ma'am.
We talked at all about the difference tins.
Okay.
We've been using that a little bit.
Let's go look. I did not. We just talked a little bit about 10 to 10 differences or something you can do. So, in what regards are you using difference tins?
When we've got, instead of a project depth, we've got a layer thickness that we need to achieve. And so we do a difference to show the layer thickness.
Okay. So you're doing a 10 to 10 difference and exporting it for the layer?
Yeah, to show the, whether they've met the 3-foot tolerance thickness they need to be, or like a 2.5. So we've got a node showing the thickness between the pre and post.
So you're, okay. I just had that up. A difference file.
Yeah.
So if you bring in two tin surfaces, tin 1 and tin 2, bring them together, which is the data set that I have. You can go in, we're going to bring in the 3x3. We'll bring in the 10x10. Let them generate them. That's going to do this merging weird thing. You can see them. If I click on here, I can see tin 2. I don't know what my colors were. Set bands. Now if I look at, I'm looking at, there's my 3x3. If I come in and I look at it at the 10x10, which we used to create a difference, I can go under export, XYZ, 10 to 10 difference, and I can specify the nodes here. So I can specify how far apart I want my grid. I'm going to say I want my grid 5 feet by 5 feet, not 56 feet. Make an output file, 5x, I created the difference of it. Now if I come back over here to my project files, add, sound style. So what I've done is taken those two surfaces and on a 5x5 grid created what the difference was. And I'm using in here, so it's only off by 9/10, it's closer over here, but over here it's a couple feet going all the way out to 5-6 feet off. Did you guys see what I was doing there? Did I go too fast for everybody? I apologize if I did.
But
Sure.
if you want to utilize whatever the data sets are actually sorted at, you would want to select the node.
Back in the tin model. Yeah, where I did that. So under export, XYZ, up here under node, if you select node, it eliminates the ability to set your grid spacing, and it does it based on where the two nodes intersect and takes that point. A truer data set.
Yeah, it's more accurate.
But it'll be loose, right?
It's not going to be as uniform spacing, so you're going to get a lot bigger gaps in there.
Based on true data.
True data, which is what we want to show people. Unless you're,
Depends on.
We want those features.
okay. Anyone else have a question for me? Sir.
We can probably talk about this. Is there anything new in technology that you want?
Tin model in 2020 doesn't have any new buttons or super features to it. Has been, I don't know if you've heard us say this, we're going through the software and trying to make it more stable and all those things. A couple of the things we've done in tin model this year have gone through to improve speed, one, reduce some of the catches where you might get an asine, cosine error, things that blow up on it. We've solved a couple of those problems. The biggest change to tin model going forward was the ability to take, anyone remember Lauser? Lauser is a doctor of mathematics that worked for HYPACK for a long time. He retired. He's a really nice guy. He's the guy that wrote the tin model program. And it's based on a lot of heavy-duty math. And Lauser wrote it. We've been able to take that program and export it into a kernel code that we put into the magedit that I was talking about. As part of tech support, the reason you use HYPACK is we give you a tool that makes you money. If we didn't provide your company a way to make money, you wouldn't use HYPACK, right? You'd use something else that made you money. And my feeling, and going forward with HYPACK, and one of the things we're focused on, is to make our tools easier. To make everything we're doing simpler for you to do, to make the tools easier and less cumbersome. A long time ago, and Ned, you understand this as well as anybody, that you had to know all these parameters, and I'm not just picking on you, but you had to know so much about it. You would load your data up, you'd clean it up, and then you'd save it to a file format, and that was a catch point. Everyone ever had a Word document delete on you because it crashed? It was a catch point, and then you went to tin model and loaded your data back up. By taking the tin model engine and being able to put it into other programs, when you're in magedit, you can generate contours. When you're in single view editor or multi view editor, you can generate contours directly from that program without having to load it back into the tin model. So our biggest focus with the tin model was to generate a stable set of code that we can now embed going forward over the next couple of years into those other programs. So you don't have to save out an entire multi-beam data set to an XYZ file and then load it up in the tin model program and check that everything loaded up right and then generate your contours. We want to provide you a tool that you're into. How many people do multi-beam? How many people do super small data sets that have 2 files? No way. So your multi-beam data set can take a while to save and to load and do these things. We're trying to streamline the process going forward, so while you don't see a lot of big changes to the tin model program, because it basically does what it needs to do, we want to take that and put it into magedit. We want to take that in the future and put it into the multi-beam editor. So all you people doing multi-beam projects, I saved my data, I've got everything where I want it, go to tools, it's not there yet, and I don't know how long it's gonna take, but be able to go to tools and generate contours right now. That's what we're trying to work towards. And those are the features that our programmers are actively trying to provide those tools. So hopefully that's gonna improve some of the stuff. We're still gonna have tin model, it's never going away. It has too many features that we wanna keep. But we definitely wanna reduce the number of programs you have to run to get to the end result. Any other questions? We're done. Let's have lunch.